I am 62 years old, and I never imagined I would be starting over with 4 children clinging to me as if I were their only lifeline. They are my grandchildren, 2 girls and 2 boys, and they came to me when their mother walked away without a word. I look at their faces every morning, brown skin too pale now from weakness, hair once braided with ribbons now tangled because I save water for cooking. The oldest, barely 10, tries to hush the younger ones when their stomachs growl. The little boy of 5 still asks me, "Grandma, is there bread today?" as if the answer might change from yesterday. When they cry at night, I press my hands to my ears, not because I don't care, but because there is nothing left to give. I tell them stories to distract them from the emptiness. I lie and say I'm not hungry, so they can share the last crust of bread without guilt. People think hunger is loud, but in my house it is silence that hurts the most. The silence of children too weak to play, too tired to argue, too quiet for their age. I begged my sister for help once. I stood in her kitchen, smelling the roast on her table, while she told me I was on my own. I walked away with empty hands, knowing 4 pairs of eyes would be waiting at home. That was the night I realized, if I didn't fight, they would not survive. That night, the house felt colder than usual. The 4 of them lay together on the old mattress, blankets too thin to keep out the draft that slipped through the cracks in the walls. I tried to rest on the chair by the door, but their whispers reached me. "Grandma, I'm hungry." It was the youngest, only 5. His small voice trembled in the dark. The older girl, just 10, tried to comfort him. "Close your eyes. Maybe tomorrow there'll be food." She spoke like someone much older than her years, though I could hear her own stomach twisting. The 9-year-old boy pulled the blanket tighter around him. He didn't speak, but I could see his eyes glistening in the dim light. The 7-year-old girl clutched her brother's hand, too quiet, too tired even to cry. I wanted to tell them the truth, that there was nothing in the cupboard, not a grain of rice, not even salt. But I couldn't let them see my despair. Instead, I whispered, "We'll be all right. Grandma will take care of it." They trusted me. That was the hardest part. Their faith in me was stronger than the hunger in their bellies, and I felt like I was betraying them with every empty promise. As they finally drifted into a restless sleep, I sat awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. My mind raced with one thought. I couldn't let another night end like this. I had no choice but to go to my sister. Even if she despised me, even if I had to endure her sharp tongue and proud looks, I would beg. For them, I would kneel if I had to. And so I decided, at dawn, I would walk to her house. At dawn, I wrapped an old scarf around my head and set out on the long walk to my sister's house. My legs felt heavy, but the thought of 4 children waiting behind me kept them moving. Her neighborhood looked like another world. Lawns trimmed, cars shining in driveways, windows dressed with curtains that smelled of money and pride. I stood in front of her porch for a moment, clutching the strap of my worn purse, rehearsing the words I dreaded to say. When she opened the door, her face froze. Not surprise, not concern, just disapproval. "What are you doing here so early?" she asked, her eyes scanning me from head to toe, as if I had carried dirt onto her clean doorstep. I swallowed hard. "I came to ask for help. The children." She cut me off with a sharp laugh. "Still clinging to excuses, aren't you? You should have thought about that before taking on a burden you can't handle." Behind her, I could see the glow of her kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee and butter filled the air. On the counter sat a basket of bread, golden and warm, while my mind kept flashing back to the empty cupboard at home. I begged. I put down my pride and pleaded for anything, just enough to feed them for one day. My words broke apart in my throat, but she never softened. "You made your bed," she said coldly, "and now you have to lie in it. Don't drag me into your mistakes." and with that she closed the door. Not slowly, not gently, but hard enough to echo through the porch and into my chest. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the painted wood, feeling smaller than I had ever felt in my life. My hands trembled as I turned away. The walk back felt longer, heavier. I imagined 4 pairs of eyes waiting at home, hoping I would return with bread. All I carried back with me was silence and shame. When I stepped back into our small house, the children rushed to me, their eyes wide with hope. The youngest tugged at my skirt, his voice soft but eager. "Grandma, did you bring food?" I froze. My mouth opened, but nothing came. Behind him, the others looked at me the same way, waiting, trusting. I forced a smile I did not feel. "Not today, sweetheart. Tomorrow will be better." Their shoulders sank, but none of them cried. They were learning too quickly that tears brought nothing. I moved towards the cupboard, pretending to search, as if something might have appeared while I was gone. The shelves stared back at me, bare as bones. I set the table anyway. 4 chipped plates, 4 bent spoons. The children sat quietly, their small hands folded, waiting for me to serve what wasn't there. The air was so heavy with silence that it pressed against my chest. I poured each of them a glass of water and told them to sip slowly. The oldest girl, only 10, gave me a faint nod, understanding more than a child ever should. She tried to smile at her younger brother, whispering, "It's enough for tonight." To distract them, I picked up the last piece of stale bread, broke it into 4, and placed 1 piece on each plate. Then I sat down and pushed my own plate away. "Grandma already ate earlier," I lied, though the hunger twisting inside me felt like fire. As they chewed in silence, I watched their thin arms and sunken faces, and something inside me broke. They deserved so much more than crumbs and water. That night, after I tucked them into bed, I sat alone at the table, staring at the empty plates. My sister's words echoed in my mind, bitter and cruel. But louder than her rejection was the sound I couldn't silence, the soft breathing of 4 hungry children trying to sleep. And I swore to myself, I would not let this go on. The next morning, I left the children still wrapped in thin blankets and walked into town. My steps were heavy, but I told myself I had to try again. Somewhere, someone had to care. At the corner store, I asked the owner if he had any small jobs, sweeping, stocking, anything. He shifted uncomfortably and shook his head. "Business is slow," he muttered, though I could see 3 clerks behind him restocking shelves. I left quietly, but I heard the whispers begin before I reached the sidewalk. She shouldn't have taken those children in. Always begging, always someone else's problem. I kept walking, holding my head up, though my cheeks burned. On Main Street, I stopped at the laundromat. I asked if they needed help folding clothes. The manager smiled politely but avoided my eyes. "Not today," she said, turning back to the counter. Everywhere I went, the pattern repeated. Polite faces, soft refusals, eyes that looked past me. Not one offer, not one kind hand. As I made my way home, I caught my reflection in a shop window. A tired old woman with silver hair and worn clothes stared back at me. But behind her, I saw 4 hungry faces waiting, and I knew I couldn't let the whispers stop me. When I reached our street, I paused. A group of women stood on a porch, speaking low but loud enough for me to hear. "She's dragging those kids down with her." Always looking for pity. I wanted to scream, but I swallowed the anger. Words wouldn't fill the plates. Instead, I walked past them, each step heavy with shame and determination. Inside our small house, the children looked at me with the same question in their eyes. I couldn't answer it. All I could do was sit with them in silence, praying that tomorrow would bring something more than empty promises. It was a warm afternoon, the kind of day when children should be laughing outside, chasing each other through the grass. My four, though, didn't play much anymore. Hunger had stolen their energy, leaving them slow and quiet. I sent them to school that morning with only water in their stomachs. I told them to be brave, to hold on until they came home. But when I arrived at the gate that afternoon, I saw a small crowd gathered near the playground. My heart stopped. It was my 9-year-old grandson. He had collapsed while running. His little body, already thin, could no longer carry him. Teachers knelt beside him, fanning his face, giving him water. They told me he was fine now, just faint from the heat. But I knew the truth. It wasn't the sun, it was hunger. I carried him home in my arms, though he was almost too big for me. His head rested against my shoulder, and I felt the fragile bones beneath his skin. Each step I took, I whispered silently, "Hold on, please, hold on." That evening, the other children stayed close, quiet with fear. The oldest girl tried to keep her brother comfortable, wiping his forehead with a damp cloth. The little one asked me if he was dying. My throat closed, but I forced a smile. "No, baby, he just needs rest." When they finally slept, I broke down alone. I pressed my hands against my chest to hold in the sobs, afraid the sound would wake them. I felt like I was failing them with every breath I took. That night, staring at my grandson's weak body on the mattress, I knew something had to change. I couldn't wait for kindness that would never come. I had to find another way, no matter the cost. That night, after the children finally drifted into uneasy sleep, I sat alone at the edge of the bed. The silence felt heavier than the hunger. My eyes wandered to the old dresser in the corner, its drawers swollen with years of dust and memories I had avoided. Something inside me pushed to open it. My hands trembled as I pulled at the handle. Buried beneath folded clothes and scraps of fabric, I found a faded envelope with my daughter's handwriting on it. I hadn't seen it in years. My chest tightened as I turned it over, afraid of what her words might say. I unfolded the paper slowly, the ink smudged, but still clear enough to pierce me. She wrote of her fear, of her shame, of the mistakes she had made. But then my eyes froze on a single line, one I had never fully read before. "If anything happens to me, you must ask Ruth. She knows where the money is. It belongs to the children." Ruth, my sister. The letter slipped from my hands. All this time, while my grandchildren wasted away, while I begged for scraps and endured her cruelty, she had known. She had held something back that could have saved them. Anger rose in me like fire. I pressed the letter against my chest, torn between grief for my daughter and fury at my sister. My mind spun with questions. What money? Why would she keep it hidden? How could she look me in the eye while my children starved? That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, listening to the shallow breaths of 4 small bodies on the mattress beside me, and I swore I would get the truth. No matter what it cost me, I would confront her. The next morning I walked back to my sister's house with the letter folded tightly in my hand. My heart pounded with every step, not from fear, but from rage I could no longer contain. When she opened the door, her face was the same as before, cold, polished, untouched by struggle. "You again," she muttered, already annoyed. I didn't waste time. I held the letter up in front of her. "Did you know?" My voice shook, but it was sharp enough to cut the air. "Did you know my daughter left something for her children? Something that belongs to them?" Her eyes flickered just for a moment. It was quick, but I saw it. The recognition, the guilt she tried to bury. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her tone smooth, dismissive. "You're imagining things." I unfolded the paper, pointing to the line that carried my daughter's name and hers side by side. "It says here, you know. You knew all along. While these children cried from hunger, you kept it from them, from me." Her smile was tight, her voice calm, but her eyes betrayed her. That letter means nothing. She was confused, irresponsible, always making mistakes. Don't drag me into her mess. My hands trembled, but I refused to let go. You stood in front of me and called me a burden while hiding what could have saved their lives. You let me beg. You let me break, while you pretended to be the better sister. She stepped closer, lowering her voice like a warning. Be careful what you accuse me of. You don't know what you're saying. But I did know. For the first time in years, I saw the truth with painful clarity. The hunger in my house wasn't only from poverty, it was from betrayal. I left her standing in her doorway, her mask beginning to crack. For once, she wasn't the one in control. As I walked back home, I held the letter tight. My anger had turned into resolve. I would not stay silent any longer. That night, I sat at the table long after the children had gone to sleep. The letter lay before me, its edges soft from years of hiding, its words burning into my chest. I traced my daughter's handwriting with my finger, as if touching it might bring her back, but all I felt was the weight of her absence. My sister had stolen more than money. She had stolen dignity, safety, the chance for these children to live without fear of hunger. And I had allowed her silence to bury me for too long. I stared at the cracked walls of our home, listening to the faint breathing of 4 little bodies in the next room. Their lives were tied to mine, and if I kept hiding, they would keep suffering. I thought of my grandson collapsing at school, of their thin arms and hollow eyes, of the way they trusted me even when I had nothing left to give. That trust was sacred. It was stronger than my shame, stronger than my fear. I whispered into the darkness, no more. I knew what I had to do. It wasn't just about begging anymore. It wasn't about knocking on doors and lowering my head. It was about truth, about exposing what she had done. There would be whispers, gossip, maybe even scorn. But for once, the shame would not be mine to carry. It would be hers. I folded the letter carefully, slipped it into my purse, and pressed it against my chest. Tomorrow, at the family gathering she had planned, I would bring the truth into the light. I was no longer the sister who walked away in silence. I was the grandmother who would fight, even if my voice shook. And I promised myself I would not leave that room until every lie had been shattered. The day of the gathering came. My sister's house was full of polished silverware, the smell of roasted meat, and the sound of laughter that felt foreign to me. Relatives I hadn't seen in years filled their plates, speaking of vacations and new cars, while in the back of my mind I saw 4 empty plates waiting at home. I stood quietly near the corner of the dining room, the letter in my purse. My hands trembled, but not from weakness. This was the weight of decision. When the meal began, I waited. I listened as my sister poured wine and played the role of gracious host, her smile wide, her voice smooth. To everyone else, she was the woman who had everything under control. To me, she was the reason my grandchildren went to bed hungry. Finally, I rose from my chair. The room quieted, all eyes turning toward me. My voice shook at first, but it grew stronger with every word. I came here today not for food, not for pity, but for truth. For years I have carried silence, but silence has nearly killed my grandchildren. I pulled the letter from my purse, holding it high so everyone could see. Gasps filled the room. My sister's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing. "This is from my daughter," I continued. "She left it behind when she disappeared. And in it, she names Ruth," I turned toward my sister, "as the one who knew where the children's money was kept. Money that was never hers. Money that should have fed them." The room erupted. Some relatives leaned closer, whispering in shock. Others looked at my sister, waiting for her to deny it. Her face tightened, but the truth had already slipped into the open. She was confused, she tried to say, her voice sharp. You can't trust the words of a woman who abandoned her own children. But no one was listening. Their eyes were on me, on the letter trembling in my hand, on the hunger they had chosen to ignore for so long. For the first time, my sister had no control. Her silence was louder than any denial she could have spoken. And in that silence, I felt something shift. The shame no longer belonged to me. The day after the gathering, my house did not feel the same. For the first time in years, people knocked on my door, not to gossip, not to judge, but to bring food. Neighbors arrived with baskets of fruit and bread. A cousin I barely knew carried a bag of rice. Even those who had once turned their backs now came forward, ashamed, placing groceries on my table, as if trying to wash their guilt away. The children's eyes widened at the sight of real food. The little boy clapped his hands when he saw bananas. The youngest girl reached for a piece of bread and kissed it before eating. The oldest, usually so serious, let out a laugh that made my chest ache with both joy and sorrow. I cooked slowly, almost afraid it was a dream. The smell of beans simmering filled the air, and for the first time in months, the table was not a place of silence, but of warmth. I served each plate with trembling hands, and the children ate until their bellies were full. I didn't take a bite at first. I just watched them. Their small faces softened, their shoulders relaxed. Their voices returned as they began to talk over one another the way children should. Tears slipped down my cheeks as I whispered to myself, "This is all I ever wanted." I knew the wound of betrayal would never heal completely. My sister's silence had cost us more than food. It had cost us years of dignity, trust, and peace. But in that moment, as laughter replaced hunger, I felt something stronger than anger. I felt victory. Not the kind that comes with revenge or riches, but the quiet triumph of knowing my grandchildren would sleep with full stomachs, safe in my arms. And I promised them and myself that never again would silence steal their future. I am 62, and my life is marked by losses I never asked for. My daughter vanished, leaving me with 4 little souls to protect. My own sister turned her back, holding secrets that could have spared us months of hunger. And my neighbors, so many of them, chose silence when I needed them most. But through all of it, we survived. They took away our dignity. They tried to strip us of hope, but they could not take what mattered most, the bond between me and my grandchildren. Their laughter has returned. Their bellies are full, and their trust in me, despite everything, never wavered. That trust is my greatest victory. I don't tell this story to ask for pity. I tell it so no one forgets what silence can do, and how betrayal can wound deeper than poverty. But I also tell it because there is strength in survival, even when the world tries to break you. If you have ever carried a burden alone, if you have ever faced betrayal inside your own family, or if you know the silence of people who should have helped but didn't, then you understand me. Share your story. Let your voice be heard. And if this story touched you, I invite you to leave a comment, to subscribe, and to walk with me as we give voice to those who have been silenced too long. Because what they took was heavy, but what we kept, our love, our resilience, our truth, was stronger.